Uh, 62, 1, right in the middle, the new Mishnah. New Paris, new Mishnah. Six.
That's the regular one. It's like 61.
62. Okay, so we're going to start. Today is Gimel Tammuz, special day. The Rebbe was always known of his greatness. The Rebbe is known of his greatness in Ahavas Yisrael. In this Gemara, we're starting to learn on the two Seirim of Yom Kippur, and it's brought down in Chassidus. From what I see, every Rebbe in Chassidus talks about the Seirim, and they were equal. One wasn't greater than the other; they were totally equal. Yet one goes to sacrifice to Hashem, and one goes to the other side. And when Hashem chooses Bnei Yisrael, there's really no reason for that choice. And when we go up to the Torah and we say Asher Bach Harbanim Mikol Ha'amim, what is Hashem choosing? He chooses our body. Our souls don't need choices. And it says that a body Chatz V'Sholom, a body of a Jew, seems to be the same as a body of a non-Jew. There's no difference. And that is the same concept of the two Seirim. They're two he-goats, and there's no difference between them. But it says, Ach Esav Li'Yaakov, Ves Esav Sanesi. There's a brother to Yaakov, but that brother is not the one that I would like. And that choice is the whole avodah of Yom Kippur. The avodah of Yom Kippur is Tzchok Kasali Elokim. Hashem does a great comedy show, and there's absolutely no reason for it. But Hashem chooses Bnei Yisrael, and that's Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ami. That's what Hashem chooses us. So let's learn the Mishnah. It says Shnei Tzirei Yom Kippurim Mitzvosam Sheyesh Neim Shavi V'Mara V'Kaima V'Vedami V'Lekichosam Ke'echad. So the two he-goats of Yom Kippur, the mitzvah is that they should be equal in look, in height, in worth, as far as the value, financial value, and they should be taken as one. So taken one means it should be either purchased from one seller, or it could be owned by two different people, but there should be one intermediary, like a seicher, like a merchant, who sells it to the hektish as one transaction. Now, what happens if they're not equal? So we had over here the equality in their looks, in their height, their value, and then they should be taken in one shot. The transaction should be made in one time. Even though they're not equal, the Mishnah says they're still kosher. So the Gemara is going to elaborate quite a bit about that. So now, if he purchased one in one day and purchased another one in another day, it's kosher. So it's still okay, it's still kosher. Meis echad mehem, if one of the two seirim, one of the two he-goats passes away, so the Mishnah differentiates. Im achala higril meis, if until he made the lottery, the he-goat passed away, ikach zug l'sheni. He should just purchase another one and make him the partner to the one that's alive. But however, if the he-goat, the seir, passes away after he made the lottery, So we have an issue. It says in the Mishnah that you have to. It says in the Torah you have to do gorelis on the two, and here we only have one. So what's the solution? Yavi zug echer. He should bring a second pair. V'yagril aleim matchila. He's going to bring a second pair, and he should make the lottery on them just as in the beginning. V'yomer, and he should say, Im shel shame mace. If the problem is that one they did a gyro, and I guess in between picking the gyro, the lottery from the box or wherever it was, I think it was a box. He puts his hand in there, and he's about to say, "This is Hashem. This is the goat dies." So we're talking about a very small period of time that he passes away, and we don't know which one it was. So the girl already happened. Why did it happen? Because he already put his hand in there. But now we don't know the one who passes away if it's for Hashem or for the other side. So he says, if the one shall shame made zesha Allah of a girl, l'shem is kind of. So in the second time he does the lottery, he says, okay, this one that if it's the one that passed away that was for Hashem, so this one is going to be instead of him. The shall Azazel mates, and if it's Azazel who passes away, zesha Allah of a girl Azazel is kind of. And what happens with the second one? Vasheni yira cheisayev. V'imocher v'ifu dama v'nedava. She'ein chatasibur mesa. So what happens to the second one? We say if this one is this one is that. So seemingly it's referring to the second one is referring to the first one because we just now chose two. So the first again the Gemara is going to elaborate. So this animal is allowed to go out to just be in the fields, and when he gets a mum, when he gets a blemish, they sell him, and the money is used for the korban nedava, to volunteer offerings. Why? She'ein chatas tzibur mesa. You can't take it normally. A chatas that has an issue with it doesn't yira actually starve. It doesn't just go ahead to pasture until he gets a blemish, but they actually put it in a room without food and he passes away. But the Mishnah preempted it because the 5 cases of a chatas where you do that, you don't apply this on a chatas of a tzibur. A chatas of a tzibur is not put in a room to let it pass away. Rather, it's left to pasture and it gets a blemish. And then after the blemish, then it's sold and the money is used for a korban nedava. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with this. He says, Thomas. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. There's no difference between this chatas and a private chatas and a korban, a communal chatas. It will go ahead and has to be put in a room and has to pass away. Rabbi Yehuda says another halacha. Nishbach Adam, or his opinion, Nishbach Adam Yomus HaMishtalech. If after they already chose the 2 he-goats, one to Hashem, one to Azazel, and they shechted the one to Hashem, and the blood spills. If the blood spills, they have to do it all over again. It's no good. So the one that's sent to Azazel, they bring him back and they put him in a room and it passes away. It's not. There's no on that one for sure. This is what Rabbi Yehuda says. There's no Mesa Mishtalech. If the one that's sent to Azazel passes away before they get to do the whole process of pushing him down the mountain, Yishafach Hadam, the blood should be spilled, and they have to bring a new one. So he's basically saying that on those 2, there's no options. You have to right away bring a brand new lottery, a brand new lot for both of them, and you need to either spill the blood or kill the animal, but no matter what, you cannot have it unless it's perfect when it comes time to
Yes.
do hazah and sprinkling the blood. Both of them have to be in play. You can't have one in play and not in play. They both must be in play. Okay, so now the Gemara starts, and twice in this, I think in the next page, page and a half, we have twice a concept. Usually, we look at something and we say, is it black? Is it white? So when you say in halacha, you say, is it kosher? Is it kosher? It's acceptable, or it's puzzle. It's not acceptable. So typically, those are your options. Is it allowed? Is it not allowed? Here, the Gemara starts with almost a monkey wrench, and he gives you a third option. What other option could you have? If it's allowed, it's not allowed. So he says there's a new option. It's called preferred. So the preferred option is something that the Torah specifically makes a limud, specifically says the words in the Torah, it's preferred to do it. However, if you didn't do the preferred method, it's still kosher. So now we have three options. So let's see what the Gemara has to say. I don't know if we have a Chumash here for Chumash Vayikra. I'm sorry, I didn't bring it. The Chamisha Chumash, right there. Yeah. Just test sign. So it says in the pasuk here on the Gemara, it says one pasuk, but there's actually a bunch of sukim. So it says, Umei Sadas. I'm just going to read the sukim really quickly, so to show you where it says it. Umei Sadas v'nei soikach shnei seir ezim v'chatas. So it uses the word shnei and seirim. V'ikirav nesfachadash v'chipar b'ad v'lokach shnei seirim. Again, shnei, two, and seirim. Again, for a third time, Shnei and Seirim. So this is gonna be very significant. So it says, Tan Rabbana Yikach Shnei Seirim Miut Seirei Shnayim. If the Torah tells us you have to take two he-goats and a plural, Seirei is plural. What's the minimum of Seirim? Two. So why does the Torah have to say the word two? It should just say Seirim. It should take plural he-goats, and we already know that the minimum amount of plural he-goats is two. So what says Matabud Laima Shnei? What does it come to teach us that it says the word two? Shiyu Shneim Shavim. We learn that both of them need to be equal. Minayin Alpha Bishain Shneim Shavim Kshavim. So here's where we get the extra color. Amud Laimar Seir Seir Riva. What does that mean, Seir Seir Riva? As long as they look like a he-goat, they're okay. He looks like a he-goat, behaves like a he-goat, he's okay. It's true, they're not equal in their looks to the perfection, but it's still kosher. So what's the reason we say that it's still kosher? Because the pasuk puts an extra word. So if it would just say Seir Seir, if it wouldn't say Seir Seir, we would think that because it says the word Shnei, two, we would say that it's not only preferred, we would say it would be puzzle. So if that's the case, Ikuva Minalan, how do we know that this is referring to preferred? Maybe what he's saying here, the Seir Seir, means that they have to be perfect. Yeah. So the Gemara answers like this. Since it says it three times it says Shnei. Why do you have to say it three times? And now we see, we also see that he says the word Seir Seir. So now it comes to teach us something else. Chad lamare. One, that they should be equal in look and equal v'chad l'kaima, equal to height, v'chad l'dami, and equal in value. And still in all, if they're not, the preferred method is to bring them like that. But if they're not, they're still kosher. So this is what the Gemara is teaching us. We have the same exact psukim or yeah. Go ahead. What? Right. So the Gemara is saying, where did you get it from? The Mishnah. Where did the Mishnah get this from? There has to be a source in the Torah. So this is where all this is coming from. Minan Emile. So the Brisa is the one who explains the Mishnah and expands it and tells us where it's coming from. The sheep, the lambs of a Mitzayra also has the same situation. What does it say? It says Yikach Shnei Kvasim. And the Gemara is going to go through the same limud. Mut Kvasim Shnayim. The minimum of lambs in a plural is two. So why do you have to have the word two if you already know that it's two lambs from the word Kvasim? What does it teach us? That they should be equal, they should look alike. How do you know that if they're not equal, that they're still kosher? That because it says the word keves keves twice, then we know that's coming to teach us that even if they're not equal, they're kosher. The same exact question. Where would we know that maybe it's talking about possible? How do we know that it's talking about preferred? So it says Zois Tia Torah Samatorah. What did that word is extra? What does it mean? Zois Tia Torah Samatorah. Zois Torah Samatorah. Why does after the word Tia? Tia. So it shall be. The word Tia means it shall be. So why do you need to have that word? That it should be. It just should say Zois Torah Samatorah. Why does it say Tia? It says V'hasha Rachmana Keves Keves. Now that the Torah says twice Keves Tia Lamali. So the answer is it should be L'shar Havayasa Shematzara. It should be the same, as equal as the rest of all the process that is brought in the Mitzvah, which means that if you brought one and it wasn't the same, it's still okay. Still kosher. V'tanya Nami Gabe Mitzvah Kehai Gavna. And also by Mitzvah we find a similar limud in psukim. It says by Mitzvah, Mitzvah, and it says you should bring shnei tziparim, two birds. Tziparim, milk, tziparim, shnayim. Matam lameshtei. Why does it say two? Shiyu shteim shalves. Again, the same limud. When it says the minimum of birds is two, why does it have to say the word two in itself? And how do we know that if they're not equal, they're kosher? Because it says it twice, not just one time. Therefore, it comes to teach us that it would be preferred, but it's still kosher. Back to the same question. The only reason is because and how do we know that we're referring to essential? Because it says the word tia, it comes to teach us that it should be equal to the whole work of the mitzvah. That if you brought one that's not equal, it's still okay. That it's not a kosher or puzzle situation, it's a preferred kosher and still kosher. So now that we said we have three examples of that the Torah teaches us uses the word two and uses the plural term and a sheep and the he-goat and the birds, and we could have learned it from the plural term, and still in all the Torah says two. So it comes to teach us this limud about preferred. It's preferred, but still kosher. So since we brought that, we're going to continue with the concept of two. If so, that two always has this type of limud, and the repeating of the word tzipor or keves keves or sorry has the limud that it's essential but it's not required. So Gabe Tmidim Nami, also by the Tamid. So every day they brought Tamid Shel Shachar and Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim. Every day they brought a sacrifice of the morning and the sacrifice of the afternoon. And over there, what does it say? It says Kvasim Neshanat Mimim. So it says lambs and Miut Kvasim Shnayim. So we know that the minimum of a plural of lambs is two. Ma Tamud Lemer Shnayim. Why does it say two? That he has to. It says here in the pasuk. Amarta lehem zeh isha shetikivu Hashem kvasim bnei shanat samimim shnayim layem elasamid. So it says the word shnayim. Why do you have to say shnayim if you said kvasim? He says it comes to teach us shiur shneim shavim. Minayin hasha'afa pi shein shneim shavim ksharim. Tamalemer keves keves riba. That it says that you have the word keves keves to teach us even if they're not equal, they're still kosher. The Gemara right away jumps inside and asks, where do we find ever that the Tmidim have to be even on a preferred level that they should be equal? There's nowhere found that they need to be equal. No, it doesn't mention it, it doesn't bring it. Where are you getting this from? So the Gemara retracts this comparison and says, no, you're right, because there is no requirement, even for a preferred method, to have the Tmidim, the one that's brought daily, to be brought equal. That's not even a preferred method. He says, Ahu, so why does it say the word Shnayim? We need to understand why it says the word Shnayim. Ahu mibai l'chedetanya. The two that says it in the Tmidim, we need it for a different limud. It says Shnayim layayim. It says two to the day. What does it come to teach us? Two for the day. Keneged hayayim. So here it's referring to something very interesting. It's referring, hayayim is referring to the sun. There's other psukim that they use the word hayayim. He says over here, that in this location the day darkened, and it's referring to the sun. So he's saying that Shnaim Layayim, it means Keneged Hayayim, opposite the day, which means opposite the rays of the sun, which is quite interesting. So now explain yourself. Are you saying that the Talmud has to be brought in the day? Or you're saying that it's against the sun? When you say that one lamb should be done in the morning and one lamb should be done at afternoon, we already see here the morning. When is the morning? It's daytime. When is the afternoon? Daytime. So you can't say that Hayoim is coming to teach us that you bring the korban tamid during the day. It has to teach us something else. So what does it teach us? The word Shnayim Layayim. He says it has to be against the sun. So actually, he explains the location of where the tamid was shechted had to be on the against the rays of the sun. So because there's a shade from the Beis Hamikdash, they used to do it on one side or the other side, depending on where the sun came. And he's going to explain it right now, which is quite interesting. The Tamid of Shachar was shechted on the northwest corner of the Mizbeach, on the second ring. So here it actually has a very nice explanation of how the rings work. In front of the Mizbeach, they had on the north side of the Mizbeach, let me see if I could put this over here, like that. Here we go. So you have over here the Mizbeach, and you have on the north side 24 rings. Okay, there we go. So we have these 24 rings, and the reason that there's 24 rings is because there was 24 mishmaras, 24 set turns, right? Oh, there you go. So, yeah. Where's the rings? Yeah, kind of difficult to see it, but yeah, I could try to. Okay. There are the rings. 24 rings. There you go. Excellent. Shkoyach. Shkoyach. Right.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah.
So it's to the north, right? So with the mishmaras, each set of koyanim, which mishmaras were you? There you go. Took the long weekend. So they each had a ring, and with that ring, they would take the animal and put it on the head and bring it down. So when the animal is shechted, it's not moving around, so they could have a kosher shechting. And there's a famous sikha of the Rebbe about Beis Bilga, the house of Bilga, which was one of the mishmaras, one of the turns of the kohanim. Their ring, iron ring, was clamped to the ground. They weren't allowed to use it anymore. They lost it because of a daughter. And this daughter, I'm changing a bit in the topic, but I think we're okay on time. This daughter, she married a Roman soldier or a Roman colonel. And one day she came to the Beis Hamikdash and she took off her shoe and she started banging the Mizbeach. And she said, Rufus, Rufus, Ad Mosai et Eichel, Ad Mosai et Mechalet Lamani Shel Yisrael, Ve'ena Oizel Lahem Be'etz Harasam. Until when do you take the money of Bnei Israel and you don't help them in their time of need? Because there was a time that the Romans were controlling and they were making a lot of terrible decrees on Bnei Israel. And because she was so disrespectful to the Mizbeach and to the Beis Hamikdash, they said that obviously there was something wrong with these Kohanim, and they gave them this penalty that they won't have their own ring anymore. And the Rebbe has a beautiful, amazing sikha explaining that this lady was so well educated at home that even when she married a Roman soldier, she still cared so much about the Jewish people, and it still pained her that the Jewish people were suffering, and she had to do something that was so dramatic, and that really it came from a very holy, deep source for her to do it. And the Rebbe is melamed zchus on her. He's speaking of the holiness of every Jew, no matter where he is in his journey, that he's always holy and is always connected to Hashem. So this is the 24 rings. So every mishmar, all the karbonos, depending on who was the turn of the week or of the 2 weeks of that mishmar. However, the
Time.
yeah,
Is this saying that at any given time, 23 were not being used?
yes. So I guess you guys don't hear that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't have a speaker. I'm sorry. He asked if the 23 were empty. That means no, they weren't used. So the 23 rings were down, and only the ring of that week of the Kohanim was up. However, there was an exception. כיצד תמיד שזוכר נשחק כרצוני מערבית, על טבעה שנייה, ושבר הבאים נשחק כמזרח צפוניס, Atabashniya. So the first time the shachar was used on the second ring on the northwest corner, and the Ben Arbaim was shechted on the northeast corner of the altar, and the goal of it was to shech the animal and have the person who's shechting the animal facing the rays of the sun. And if we have time, we could talk about the sun and what was going on with the sun, but I'll do that only at the end if we have time. Taisus has a very big question over here. He says that according to Rashi, who's explaining it, that it has to do specifically with the sun rises in different places, depending, obviously in one direction, but in different corners of that direction, depending on the days and the season of the year. So maybe in the winter is X and in the fall is. So how could it be that it was always in the same place? I didn't understand exactly how the answer was, but there's a argument between Rashi and Taisus about that and how that fits in the Gemara. Shachar was early in the morning. Yeah, very, very early, yes. So it depends. The sun would rise in the same location, but from different angles of that same location. So depending on the winter or summer, it would be different locations. Yeah, in the morning, yeah. I think it was what's that? Yes, they had to make sure that the walls weren't shading. There's so much walls. They would do it in the morning. I think it's an hour after the nates or something of that. So there was you could look it up pretty quickly and help us out. Exactly the time. I guess I didn't have that prepared. I'm sorry. And the Gemara adds, Musafin shel Shabbos, v'adei tzichu she'ishnei shavim. However, the Musaf of Shabbos, that there was two lambs that were brought on Shabbos, they had to be equal, because it says V'yom Shabbos shnei kvasim, and it says the word two, and there's no other limud to teach us that it's not essential. So therefore, we know that whenever it says two, it means that it's required for the mitzvah, unless there's another pasuk that teaches that it's not essential, that it's preferred. But in the case of the Musaf of Shabbos, it had to be equal. Both lambs had to be equal. We get an update. You looking in Hebrew text or English? Okay. Okay, good. Tarabanan Shnei Seir Yom Kippurim Sheshachta B'chutz. If a person shechts the two Seirim outside the temple courtyard, so if he did not make the garlands on them, there's a chiyuv kares. When you have a korban that you have to bring inside the Beis Hamikdash, inside the chatzah, and you do it and shecht it outside, there's a chiyuv kares. There's a disconnect, chas v'shalom, on that person who did it. So if he did it until there was a lottery, he's chayav on both of them. However, if he already did the lottery on them, chayav shel shem, ufato shel azazel. So this is quite interesting. So if he already did the lottery, so he's chayav on the one that goes to Hashem, because that one has to go into the Beis Hamikdash. But he's potter on the one for Azazel. Why? Because the one for Azazel does not come into the Beis Hamikdash, and there's a special pasuk that says that it has to be a korban that he doesn't bring into the Beis Hamikdash. Then he's chayav kares. So only a korban that you could bring into the Beis Hamikdash are chayav kares, but you're not chayav kares on a korban that you cannot bring into the Beis Hamikdash. The Azazel is not brought as a korban. The reason that you would chayav two before there was a lottery, because you don't know which one it is, maybe both of them could be brought. But the Gemara is going to start going questions on that. It says, why are you saying that if you didn't have a girl, you're chayiv on both of them? We learned, Amar of Chizda, Hoil veroil asoy hanasa b'chutz. Since he uses the famous term in the Gemara, we've seen this several times. The word hoil. Hoil means since. Do we say since or we don't say since? We found that machlokes many times. Of Shimon, different places. Do you say the word hoil? We don't say the word hoil. So now we're learning that Rav Chisda uses the famous word hoil. He says since you could use it as a sorry that's done afterwards. What happens? That after he does all these processes, there's a third he goat that's brought from Musaf, and that one is done outside. It could be done outside. So therefore, even the one that potentially is azazel could be done outside before the goyrel. Once they did the lottery, you can't change its designation. But before you did the lottery, it's already designated as a chatas, as a seir. So instead of using it for the shnei seirim, for the goyrel, you could change the designation and use it as a seir for musaf. And that sorry of Musaf is allowed to be done outside, and therefore, why should he be chayiv on both of them? He should be chayiv only on one. So the Gemara says no. He says, how could you say that there's a difference? How could you say that the story before there was a girl, you could go ahead and bring it to a story of Musaf? How are you going to say that? Because you say, oh, there was no Gairo. There wasn't a Gairo, and therefore we could use it, and in our mind we could designate it for the story of Musaf. And says, no. It's already in theory, it's already in Hoyle, in sense, it's just missing some time. It's in the Yom Kippur, every minute was counted. So, if we wait 2 more minutes or 5 more minutes, he's going to have the girl on it, and then you will not be able to sacrifice it inside. Why are you saying that one of them is that he's chayiv on both of them? Let's say that he's only chayiv on one, because vinishvi, any which way that you look at it, in a couple of minutes' time or whatever amount of time, there's going to be a girl, and one of them is not going to be able to be sacrificed inside, and then you're not chayav on it. So that's what the Gemara asks. So the Gemara says, the Gemara answers for Rav Chisda. He says that you can't say hoil on time of the same day. You can't say that since the time is going to pass, and he's anyhow going to be getting the girl, so therefore we should apply that already now. He says, no, on time, on the same day, you can't say hoil. So the word since, you say it since anyhow it's going to happen. So in this case, he says you can't say that when it's missing the time to the same day that you say hoil. And therefore, Rav Chisda says that he's only chayav on one. By the way, there's 3 opinions on this. We're going to see the Gemara. It gets really interesting. Amar Ravina. Ravina says, Hashta da Amar Rav Chisda mechusa hargala. Now that Rav Chisda says that a sawyer that's missing the lottery to make it, to designate it to which one, Hashem or Azazel, Kemechusa or Maisedami, it's similar than to an animal or a situation that's missing an action, missing in an act to get it to the next stage. So he's already determining that mechusa hargrala, that when it's missing the act of the lottery, it's like an action. The lottery is an act to do. Adam or Rav Amar Shmuel, we have a question. Rav Amar Shmuel says, Shlami sheshachtan kodesh sheniftachu daltos ha'echel psulim. If somebody brings a korban shlami, and he was so excited, and he shechted it before the doors were open to the heichal. You're supposed to have the doors open. Why? Shenemar v'shachtu Pesach Oil Moed. The Korban Shlomim, you shecht it in the entrance of the Oil Moed. The entrance of the Oil Moed has to be open. If it's closed, that you're not shechting it by the entrance. Bizman shehu pasuach v'lo bizman shehu no. Only the time that it's open and not in the time that it's locked. So if that's the case, heichel is this one. Yeah, it has to be open. What? Okay, next time. Or pretty soon. So it says, "Bizman shehu pasuach v'lo bizman shehu no." Has to be when it's open. Shachtam b'chutz kodesh nitzuchu dalto seichel is potter. My time, mechusar psicha ke mechusar ma'asidame. So he says like this. This review the Omer Shmuel. It's not. He should do it, and they're according to him that they're invalid. However, he doesn't. He's not chayav the lav or the kares because eventually they're going to open up. So what is he doing? He's missing a little bit of time. He got excited. He did it earlier. Assumption that it was shechted in the day, but the gates weren't open, so it's invalid. Again, we're bringing a new color. We're always thinking in black and white, kosher or posel, good and not good. Here he's saying that it's invalid, but he's potter. He's not chayev the lav or the kares. Why? Because mechusar psicha ke mechusar masedami. That the fact that it's lacking the opening of the doors is like lacking action. And if it's a matter of time where it's going to open up shortly, so it's like it's going to happen anyhow, so therefore it's potter. It's not valid, it's not a kosher korban, but he's not high of the kares. Because the doors are going to open up anyhow, and therefore you say the word since. Hoyu. Remember, this whole argument is since the doors will open anyhow. Okay, so it's not valid, but he's not going to get the lav and the kares.
Not valid, and he
He doesn't
doesn't get punished.
get that punishment. Correct. It's not valid. It's not a valid thing, a korban. But he, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm not saying that this is what it is because I don't know for a fact. But I guess you could say it's not kosher, but it wasn't done like extra maliciously. You know, like he wanted to do something against Hashem chas v'shalom, and Hashem is going to cut him off. He was excited about his korban. After all, what is he doing? He's bringing a korban. So what is he? He bringing a korban, and he wants to purposely do something against Hashem. He overlooked it. So what this Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel is saying, okay, his korban is not kosher, but he's not going to get the big whack. You know, give him a chance. Now the Gemara questions of Chisda. It says like this: Umi isa Rav Chisda hayu. Does Rav Chisda really use the word, the terminology? Does he subscribe to this very, very strong concept? Since in the future we could say this and this and this and this, therefore it's okay. Well, Rav Chisda, so he's going to bring us a question from a learning that Rav Chisda himself said. Well, Rav Chisda, doing okay? Rav Chisda, Pesach sheshachta b'chutz, Pesach that he shechted it outside the Beis Hamikdash during the year is lishmoi. If he shechted it and he had it in mind that it should be a korban Pesach, it's potter. Shaloi lishmoi, but if he didn't have an intention, he's chayav. Again, the Gemara is going to give you a beautiful black and white multicolor. So basically saying like this: if you shech the korban Pesach not Erev Pesach, just in the regular amount of the year. And in your head, you're saying, I'm shechting this in honor of Korban Pesach. It's not the Pesach Sheni that you're chayav Pesach Sheni. You're shechting Korban Pesach in Rosh Hashanah. It's nothing. It's not a Korban. It's nothing because you can't shech a Korban Pesach during the year. Not possible. This animal was designated in his mind for Korban Pesach, and it's nothing. However, if he didn't shecht it for Korban Pesach, Lo Lishma, he didn't shecht it for Korban Pesach, he's chayav. Why? Because Korban Pesach during the year could be used as a shlomim. So, for example, if you designated a Korban Pesach and you didn't bring it as a sacrifice of Korban Pesach because you didn't get in on time to your there were three times that people were designated to do Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. You didn't make it. What are you supposed to do? Well, you don't make it. The Korban Pesach, the third color. So time Shalom. What's the reason that he's chayev? Because he didn't slaughter it, but he didn't slaughter it for the sake of Pesach, but he still had a thought to slaughter it for a korban, right? He's still thinking of a korban, but not korban Pesach. That he's chayev, because the korban shlomim, you're not allowed to shecht it outside. He shechted the korban outside. So if he shechted for Pesach, it's absolutely nothing, because there is no korban Pesach outside during the year. But if he didn't shecht it for korban Pesach, he says, "I'm just bringing a korban," and he didn't have the in mind of Pesach, then he's going to be chayev, because the korban shlomim has to be brought inside. Now the Gemara does a deduction. It says, what's the reason that he's chayev? Because he didn't have the intention of Pesach, he had the intention of a korban. Hastama, here's the multicolor. What if he had no intention at all? He didn't intend it to be a korban, but he shechted it, and he didn't have intention for korban Pesach or korban shlomim. We have the third option. What happens to it? Lishma, do we say that it's considered lishmoy, that we would say no intention, he must be thinking that it's a korban Pesach, why would it be shefted, and he's going to be potter? Or we say, lema hoy v'roy shaloi lishmoy bifnim, and he would be chayev. Or we say, maybe the fact that he had no intentions at all, he meant no intention at all, that it would be like shlamim. And since shlamim, you would be chayev because it has to be brought inside. So what are we saying over here? So we brought a third realm. We're not saying that he had intentions for Pesach. We're not saying that he had intentions for non-Pesach. He had zero intentions, no intentions, just shechted it. So where do we take the zero intention thought? And this obviously must be in everyday life. When you're doing something with zero intention, maybe even the Gemara is trying to push to both sides. You daven with no intention. You daven with kavana, you daven shalom kavana, and you daven without intentions. Where's your thought? The Gemara is going so deep here that it's going into your profound areas of your thought. It's almost your subconscious we're talking about. We're talking about how the Gemara is telling us about Torah, that's deep diving into your subconscious. And it's trying to find out, where is your subconscious headed to? The Gemara answers, it says, Hachi hashta, there's a difference over here. Hachi hashta, sorry?
It's good.
Hachi hashta hasam by Akira, highlight by Akira. He says, oh, there's a difference. We know the answer by Pesach. Why are we going to know the answer by Pesach? Because by Pesach, a korban Pesach stays a korban Pesach the whole year. Unless you specifically in your mind designate it for korban shlomim. Unless you had that action in your mind that you uprooted the designation of Korban Pesach on this animal stays a Korban Pesach no matter what. So the answer is that if you had no intentions, it's still a Korban Pesach and you're potter. Because in order to undo the Korban Pesach, you had to have halachically a specific intentions to make it a Korban Shlovim to be chayav. So you had to shechter not le Korban Pesach. So the fact where you say the word stama means no intentions, you have to go ahead and you're going to be potter on that because you had to unroot the Korban Pesach in a designation of Korban Shlovim. However, if we're talking about the two seirim, the two he-goats, in the case of the two he-goats, loy boy akira, we don't need to undo the he-goats from their status. Why? Because the he-goats are korban chatas, and the he-goat of Musaf is also a korban chatas, and therefore we said that if it was before the lottery and there were two he-goats, you could potentially, according to Rav Chisda, you could designate that he-goat, one of the he-goats, for the Musaf of Yom Kippur, and therefore you should be chayav only on one, not on two. So this is how we answer Rav Chisda. Now there's another opinion, another version that says that this wasn't Rav. It was Rabbi Bar Shimi Masalahu B'derabba. This whole statement that Rav Chisda.
Oh.
Okay, I came back. Naftali, could you hear me? Okay, good. So he's saying that it's a Rabbi Bar Shimi, Masalahu the Rabba, V'kasha the Rabba, Mishana Kishamina. He says this whole Shakla V'tayr, this whole part of the Gemara that we just read, really it's Rabba, and it's a question on Rabba, and the answer that we gave is the answer of Rabba, and that's exactly what it is. All right, very good. Another opinion, yeah. When it comes down to receiving the names are no less important than the actual text and the actual topic that we're talking about, because the name is always connected. The Rebbe speaks about that the name of the Rav of the Tana or the Amira or the Rav who's speaking about the halacha, his name is always connected to his halacha that he's saying, or the Talmud that he's saying, there's a connection to it. So it's very important to know who's the name. And we know that in Torah, when you say something in the name of who said it originally, you bring redemption to this world. Why do you bring redemption to this world? So there are many, many reasons. I'm not going to tell you all the reasons, but the most down-to-earth explanation reason is if you're humble enough not to take credit for that saying, for that Torah, for that halacha, for that teaching, and you are humble enough and you introduce it and say, this was taught to me or this was said by this rabbi, then that act of humbleness and giving graciousness and honor to another where you could have hid it and given it to yourself, that is the redemption. Because ultimately the purpose of redemption is that there shouldn't be jealousy between one another, there shouldn't be hatred and there shouldn't be wars. And that is the first act of giving honor and respect to someone that you didn't have to. So that's why the Gemara puts so much emphasis on who it was said. Sometimes it goes 2-3 generations down. It says this one said in the name of this one, and this one said in the name of this one, and there's those opinions who said it in the name of the other one, and the Gemara puts so much emphasis on who said it, because we understand part of if we go even deeper into the Torah that we're learning, we will understand it more by understanding the name of the rabbi who said, of the Tana or the Amar who said it. We'll understand how it's connected to his name and connected to his life. So this is very, very important. What's that? Right. No, for sure you should say it, but obviously you want to. Why is Mevi Geula La'ilam? Why is it bringing redemption to this world? That's what I was saying. What's the reason? You have to do it, but why is it? There's such an emphasis on making sure, and you guys were just smiling. They said, "Oh, they just knocked it out. It's not Rechizda, it's Rava." You know, okay, next.
48 ways of Kenyan Torah.
Right.
If everybody uses it and then acquires Torah, that brings it because
Everybody's learning Torah.
they made Torah.
The connection, the acquisition. Perfect. Shkoya. Just repeating it. I guess you didn't know on the people on the Zoom that. Give me your name. Ian was just bringing that there's 48 ways to Kenyan Torah to acquire Torah. And this is one of the 48 ways. And when you acquire Torah, you bring Geula. That's how you bring the Geula. Very good, Shakra. Also, Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, a lot of times Kiasa, they comes from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Bavel to Yisrael. Rabbi Smith always talks about the 3 travelers, and Rav Dimi was one of the travelers. Omar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Omar Rabbi Yechanan, Pesach sheshachtei b'chutz, b'sh'ar yemei Shana, Bein l'shmoi, ben shelo l'shmoi pata. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Rav Dimi came, and this is going to be so interesting now. Rav Dimi, he has almost does a complete U-turn, but let's see. He says Pesach that was shechted on the outside. You're not allowed to shech Pesach during the year. He says whether he had intention, whether he didn't have intention, he's potter. Even if he had an intention, he didn't have the intention for Korban Pesach. And according to the previous place, we said that if you don't have the intention of Korban Pesach, according to according to Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, even in that case, he disagrees and he says you're potter. You can't be chayav on Korban Pesach that you shechted during the year. So that's the statement. Omar Rav Dimi says, Amrisi l'shmaite kamei Rabbi Yirmiyah. I repeated this statement in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Obviously, Rabbi Yirmiyah was, I believe, a student of Rabbi Yechanan or his later generation. So Rabbi Yirmiyah wasn't he didn't right away grasp it. He said like this: Bishlam elishmai. If you say that he shechted elishmai, the halechazale. You can't shech Pesach during the year. It's not appropriate. So therefore, he's potter because he didn't shech the korban outside the Beit Hamikdash. Korban Pesach you can't shech outside the Beit Hamikdash. Ela shelo lishmoi, amai. It could be brought if you brought it shelo lishmoi. You will be able to bring it as a korban shlomi in the Beit Hamikdash. You should be chayav. Why are you saying that he's potter? So Rav Dimi is saying all this in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. So what does Rabbi Yirmiyah answer him? He gives him a very strong response. He says like this: what did we say before? Again, multicolor. What did we say before? That if you had the intention of Korban Pesach during the year, and you shechted it for the intention of Korban Pesach during the year, what happens? You're potter. Because if you had the intention of Korban Pesach during the year, there's no such thing, doesn't exist, and therefore you're potter. However, remember we said that Korban Pesach could only be uprooted with an intention. You can't uproot Korban Pesach without an intention. You can't do stama. You can't just say, I have no intention, therefore it's not Korban Pesach. That cannot happen. If you want to uproot the Korban Pesach, you have to have a specific intention, shaloi lishmoi, which means you're designated as a korban shlami, and therefore you'll be chayav. So Yomi brings a third dimension, and he says like this: Akira schus lav shma akira. To undo the korban pesach during the year, it could only happen in the Beis Hamikdash. You cannot undo a korban pesach outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So if a person shech even shaloi lishmai, he still will be potter. Why? Because there's no such thing, according to Rav Dimi, who brought in the name of Rav Yirmiyah, there's no such thing as undoing a designation of a korban outside the Beis Hamikdash. The only time you have the opportunity to undo a designation is inside the Beis Hamikdash. Monkey wrench. Boom. He could say anything he wants outside the Beis Hamikdash, doesn't count. And therefore that korban is not a korban, and therefore he's potter. So there's no such thing as being chayev on shechtim, korban pesach, outside the Beis Hamikdash during the year. Not possible. You have to be in the Beis Hamikdash to have the intention. So what I don't know if you guys know about the Google, they have geofencing. Geofencing, if you ever try advertising in Google or in Facebook or in different places, they have something where you could target an area, not target a segment of people. You could target an area and say, okay, every person who passes by this restaurant or this store gets my advertisement. So we just geographically fenced it. So what the Gemara is telling us, that you have certain thoughts that are very powerful and can do and undo things. However, your thoughts don't have sufficient juice, sufficient energy, sufficient power. If you're not in the geographical boundary of the Beis Hamikdash, you cannot undo this korban. Again, the Gemara is going deep diving into your thought, into your subconscious. And it's going to tell you what powers you have of that subconscious to go ahead and affect things in the physical realm. What's that? Yeah, the house always wins. A house always wins. Always wins. That's in the words of the great Yitzhak. Yeah. Today you can do. Okay, we're going to continue a little further. Yeah, so when Ravin came, now that's what happened when Ravin came from Babel, from Babylon to Eretz Yisrael. Now we have the other way. After this whole experience, I'm sure he was so excited to go back to Babel to teach him of what Rabbi Yirmiyah told him. That must have been one of the tremendous highlights. So he said, if you learn one thing, dayenu, if you come to this world to learn one thing, it's you should be happy. So he was so excited. Ravin goes back to Babel. When Ravin came, Ravin is another Amara, because it was Rav Dimi. Now you have Ravin who comes from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. He says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Pesach sheshachta b'chutz b'shar yomai shana, bein lishmoi, bein shal lishmoi chayav. He says the exact opposite. A Pesach, if you shechted it because it was designated a korban, has nothing to do with your thoughts. You could say, I shecht it for a Pesach. I'm not shechting it for a Pesach. I don't know what I'm shechting. You're always chayav. This is a korban. Forget about your thoughts. He just blew everybody out of the water. The first one said it's your thought, not your thought. Is your thought that you have zero intentions, that you have negative intentions, positive intentions, zero intentions, makes no difference. This is a korban, and as long as it's a korban, you're chayav. We don't care about your thoughts. The Gemara doesn't really, the Gemara right away jumps into questions. He says, really? Afilu lishmai? Are you saying that he's chayav if a person that has intention to shech the korban pesach during the year outside the Beis Hamikdash, and he has intention of korban pesach Are you saying that he's chayev? Vatnan, we learned in the Mishnah. Now we're going to go into this part. Mechusar zman. If a korban is missing time, what does it mean? You're missing time. A korban has to be at least 8 days old before it's brought. So if somebody takes a korban and brings an animal that's only 5 days old, it's missing 3 days. Whether it's begufoy, bein bebalim. What is mechusar zman bebalim? Begufoy means he's missing time in his body, which means they brought him prematurely. What is a prematurely? If the korban was brought 5 days old, the age of the korban was only 5 days instead of 8 days. So in its body, it's missing time. What if there's missing time on the biling? Right away, the Gemara says, or actually, this is the Mishnah. What is someone who's missing premature and missing time in the owners? Hazav, Hazava, Vahayoledes, Vahametzara. So these people, they have a limit of time. So let's say a Yoledes, she has to bring a korban within 40 days of giving birth. What if she brought a korban within 35 days of giving birth? So she's missing 5 days. Or a Zav and a Metzara, they all have designated amount of days that after they become pure, they have to bring a korban. What if they brought the korban earlier? Yeah, but he's talking about the yeah. Yeah, there is. Yeah, because they were the Rashi says Turim. That their time to be pure is not there. So he says that in both all in the case of Zav, Zav and Metzara, they can't come inside because they're tummy, but Bachutz they brought it. So the question is it accepted as a korban or it's not a korban at all? So he says it's Turim. Obviously, you're not supposed to do it. You're not supposed to bring a korban b'chutz. These people who are missing, so basically they are chayav in a korban. There's no question that the animal that was designated as a korban is already a korban. It's designated. But we have to wait 3 more days till it becomes 8 days to sacrifice it. So the animal itself is a korban, but it's missing time. The same thing with the zav and the metzara and the yeledes. They are chayav in a korban. There's no question that they're chayav in a korban. They're already jumped into the process of time that already tells us that they're 100% chayav in the korban. However, they brought it early. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, turim. They're not chayav. But if they give an oiler or shlomim b'chutz, which those could be brought inside, so they are chayav. So it's part of their purification. It's part of their requirements. They're supposed to bring a chatas, but they're also supposed to bring an oila, and they potentially could bring shlomim. So if they did that earlier and they did it b'chutz, they would be chayav because those could be brought inside. So therefore, they're chayav. V'omer of Chilkiya bar Tuvi. Chilkiya bar Tuvi says on this, Lo shanu ela lishmoi. We didn't. All this thing that we learned in the Mishnah is only if you had the intention of say a Yeledes brought korban chatas with the intention that it's for her giving birth. Elishmoi, but if they brought any of these things, which means if you brought an animal less than 5 days, less than 8 days, or you brought the owners of a Zav, Zava, Yoledes, and Metzara brought the korban outside, Shaloi Lishmoi, without the intention that it's the korban that they have the obligation to bring, and they brought it, in such a case, you are chayav. Because since you had no intentions, ultimately it's like shlamim, and shlamim could always be brought inside. And therefore, you're chayav. So the Gemara says like this: Lishmoi, however, if you do bring it, Mia Potter Amai, name a hoil veruin shaloi lishmoi bifnim. So in Hebrew, you use the term hafuch al hafuch. You say, okay, so they had the intention of bringing. So let's say a Yoledis, the one who gave birth, she had the intention to bring this korban as a fulfillment of her obligation. It was lishmoi. So what? So undo it and say, but if she would have thought that it's not lishmoi, we could bring it inside. So therefore, she should be chayav. It's like, okay, so what are we saying? We're talking about thoughts. If you're already saying the word sin, hoil, if we're already bringing in this whole concept sin, you say, okay, but since she had the intention of doing it outside as her obligation, let us say that she could also have the intention of not, and therefore she should be chayav. So you just twisted the whole thing around, and again, you went into deep diving of your subconscious. The Gemara says no. You can't compare this Mishnah and the explanation of Rav Chilkiah Bar Tuvi to the Pesach sacrifice. Why? Pesach a Pesach, even though we said before that there was according to one Rav that you can't do a kira of Pesach without it being bachutz. That was only one opinion. He says Pesach is, if you bring a Pesach, a korban Pesach on the 14th day, or any day, but in that, just as an example, I'll use the 14th day of Nisan, and you didn't make it to one of the three time sets, the three times that you were supposed to bring the korban, and you missed it, and you still are left with this korban Pesach. The Torah tells you that that korban, it's still a korban, and the only way you could bring it as a sacrifice is a shlamim. So therefore, you don't need a kira. You don't have to go ahead in your mind and say this Pesach is a shlamim. It's already a shlamim. What? Yes, yes. Because it's a korban, you can't bring it a korban Pesach. You can't kill it. It's a holiness. So what should you do with it? Bring it to korban shlamim.